Hi there folks, in this video I'm going to cover my workflow from a linear stacked image in Serial on the left here to a final image on the right, along with some pitfalls that I find along the way and just generally what I do. This isn't the be's alls and end all, and a lot of this information can be found in Deep Space Astro's tutorials. He covers a lot of work. This is basically because a couple of friends asked me what my workflow is. Now we're going to make a couple of assumptions in getting started on this, which is that you know how to process your images to get a stacked image in Serial. Like so here, so you know how to do your biases, your darks, your flats, and of course your lights. Now, a big one to note with this image is 2 nights worth of photography and 2 different slightly framings stacked. So there are some issues with this image which we are going to have to deal with. I'm going to show why we're going to have to deal with some of them. So this is the auto stretch, and we're going to auto stretch because it gives us a good idea of what we're going to see rather than just a straight linear image. And we can see some problems instantly with this shot. If we look here, we have some major stretching happening because if we come back to our lights here and we take a look at some of these, they were right up along the edge of the framing, and we get a lot of stretching due to the lens edge here, and this all transfers when we do our stack and processing in. What happens here is when we try and do a photogrammic plate capture, this will screw everything up. So we're going to have to crop this image to begin with. Now, it's a little bit of a shame because I'd hoped to get, some of down here with the extra detail, but we're not going to get that. So we're going to focus primarily on the Great Orion Nebula here. We're going to do a crop of this area here, and we right click, come down to crop. So now we have our cropped area. First thing we're going to do here is a background extraction. So there's a couple of ways we can do this, like Deep Space Astro and the Alot shows. You can just turn around and go generate bang and the like, but just like him, I hate doing it this way because while it generates this nice grid, we can already see a bunch of problems. Most of these are on just good old space, but we've got a star on this one, 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 on this one as well. We've got another one here, another one here, another one here, another one here. This one's on a star, this one's on a star. This section's actually kind of on the nebula, so we need to remove some of this, that one's okay. This is coming down and into some of the nebula stuff that I actually want to keep. It's not background, that one was on a star. That one's still in some of the nebula noise, that one's on a star. So we're going to put that's on a star. Things. We're just going to, we right click to remove any that are on a star, and we left click to put down a new sample point. So we're just going to try and sample some areas that don't sit on stars here. This one's not bad. It's not bad. And sometimes it is actually a lot faster just to go through and do these all manually. I tend to not mind the grid, but at the same time make certain to go through and just double check that nothing is on a star, nothing is on the nebula itself that we're trying to get a photo of, because the last thing we want is to lose the detail in this. We don't want any of it extracted. Down here. This area here. See, we've got a bit of a nebula just here. We don't want to lose it either. We've got a little bit here, a little bit here and here. That's on a star, we don't want that. That's on a star, we don't want that. Okay, so we're going to tell this to compute the background. So we notice it leveled out a chunk there, so before, after. Now we're going to remove the green noise. This is the green noise removed. Now we're going to do a photogrammic color calibration on everything. So photographic, we know that this is the Orion Nebula, which is Simbad M42. We're going to let it try and do an automatic detection, which is just done. There, and now, one of the things we can see here is this seems to be a little washed out. Now, there's two reasons this can be washed out. One is that we did our removal of the grain cast a little bit early, so we're just going to go back to here, which is before we did our remove of the green cast. So there's our crop. And we're just going to do photogrammic calibration back here. And we'll notice we've suddenly got a bunch more color in here. It's a lot better. So we go OK, we go close, we go OK. Now we'll do our remove green noise. And we've still got all this colour in here. So the next thing we're going to do is just a general noise reduction. I'm going to turn the modulation down a little bit. Apply. We're going to wait while it does this. So here we've just removed a little bit of the noise, which will help us later on. So before, after, not a big difference, but there is one there. Next, we could do a deconvolution, which might fix some of the stars up over in this area, but I've found on this image it doesn't tend to work. So instead, we are just going to move on to our star processing. We're going to run StarNet removal. We're going to do a base generation, but before that, we're just going to actually do a save as. We're just going to call this tutorial nebula 01.fit. So we're just saving the file as is, so that if anything happens we can deal with it. So now, star processing, starnet star removal, we're going to pre-stretch, we're going to generate the star mask, and we're going to execute. It's going to run through. It did the neural net, it's running through. It's also hammering the computer a little bit, but this should run fairly quickly if your computer's new. If it's not so new, it might take it a little bit. Okay, so our starnet removal's done. We now have the nebula itself and not much more. So we're going to move out of the linear. And now we're going to start doing some general stretching before we take it into Photoshop. So there's two ways we can do this. I typically just come into here to begin with at times and just have a quick look at what the auto stretch was looking like. Problem is here we're losing some clip and I don't like that. We can also come into a generalized hyperbolic stretch here, and in here I'm going to do a generalized hyperbolic transform. I'm just going to boost this up until the point where I start seeing a bit of everything. So we can start seeing the nebula. We're going to apply that. Now I want to boost this just a little more, but chances are I'm not going to get it exact. So I'm going to select this area, then click the symmetry point. This moves where our stretch is happening. And we're going to try a stretch. Again. And not too bad. So we're going to apply that. Close. Now we're going to come back over and we're going to have a look at our histogram transform. And we can see we've got some data over here. And some data here. So, but if we move our midtones back, we blow out a lot of this. We can get some of that back by moving the darks over, but it's really tricky. We can try and zoom all the way in. Still not clipping, which is good. Our midtones aren't too bad. When we bring our mids more to here, this is really blown out a bit, but we should be able to fix this in Photoshop. So we're going to hit apply, close. So we've got our general image here. So now we do save as. First we save this one just in case we need to come back to it. I tend to save in increments here. I really don't care if we're getting multiple files. Hard drive space is cheap and we can always remove them later. So we're going to save a TIFF file. Save. We want it in 16-bit unsigned integer. We're going to save that. Now we're going to come into Photoshop. We're going to open. We're going to find the TIFF file we just saved. So that is this one just here. We're going to open it and we get this image here. Now the first thing we're going to do is come image, adjustments. We're going to adjust our levels. Now what we're seeing here is the histogram. We can see that we have all this area here with no data. So we're going to move our darks over. We don't want it to start, we don't want it to clip though. So we want to move it to here. Hit OK. So at this point we have slightly better image. It's darker. We're going to run a camera raw filter on it. You can see we still have some dark here, but we can get a little bit more control over it in here. You can also see it if we come to our curves here. So you can see all this area here is currently still no information. So what we do, we come in here and we're going to slide our blacks to the left here, which is going to darken it up, and we're going to do it until we see the little triangle up here telling us that we have a clip. So you'll notice that it just went red, which means we're clipping on the red channel. We're losing data. We don't want to be losing data. So right there, just gotten a significant amounts of our background darkness back. Our whites are clipping slightly. We can try and bring this back just a little bit, because we don't want it clipping. So that brings this back just a little bit. Now we can start looking at things like our contrast and our highlights and the shadows. So we've got a fairly bright highlight here, which we can go one of two ways. We can blow it out, we can bring it back, or we could leave it as is. So blowing it out to me doesn't really work, but if we bring it back just a little bit, we bring out a little bit more of this pinkish of the nebula, and our shadows, by the looks of it, just a little bit there. Finally, we can bring up the contrast a little bit, but we'll notice as we're fiddling with the contrast, we've started to clip the blacks. So we ease the blacks forwards again. And that highlight's still blowing out a little bit, but we can also, because of that, we can also increase our white point back up a little bit. So that's not looking too bad for a general start. We've got some nice contrast happening in here in the blues. This is all being drawn out. So we can come down, now we can look at the texture and see if adding a little bit of texture here helps, which you'll notice, so this is really soft, wispy like, and as we add in some of the texture options here, we start boosting some of the reds and the like. So reds is clipping in the blacks, so we're going to have to bring the blacks back just a little bit. We can also play with the clarity, which will make things pop just a little bit more. It looks a little artificial to me when we get up there. So maybe around here. And the dehaze, bring that in just a little bit. We'll notice it's just dehazing some of this without, and then we can do our vibrance. So this is personal taste. I tend to like somewhere around about here. It's bringing out the blues, the pinks here without blowing everything out. I don't tend to touch the saturation that much because a lot of the times it just oversaturates for me, and I just don't personally like it. Plus we quickly clip, and I'd really like this dark section. So we've got this part done so far. We could come play with the grading on each levels, or we can look at our saturation and luminance values here. So this magenta like colour, you know, maybe we want to see if we can't get it to pop just a little bit more. In the nebula here, so you can get this highlight band just a little bit up. The purples maybe down just a little bit because that desaturates some of the bright remnant here. The blues, we removed a lot of the blues with our sorry, the greens we removed a lot of, but you'll notice the blues just tend to pop up in the back and over here because this is actually more of a teal aqua colour. And even then, see, we're not getting too much of a boost. And a lot of this is, as other people point out, just personal taste. Greens we should not have a lot of, and the reason for that is green would be methane, stuff like that, and it's not actually typically a really prominent item in astrophotography. Green cast is typically caused by camera issues and atmospheric distortion. So actually I'm liking this. If we knew exactly where we had some fringing issues, we could defringe, just as if we knew the exact lens information, which technically we do, we could also, and we're still working on a full image, we could work on that. But I'm happy with this. So we have gone from this to this. So this to this. Before, after. Before, after. Now we could play for a long time in here. We can come in, we could pop out just individual areas, try and make more pop. Fairly happy with this one, so we're just going to do a save so that we can take it back in. One other thing you can do if you're curious, you know, maybe what would it get with a little bit more data, you can always look at what more data would have of exactly the same sort would give, and you'll notice that for the most part it's just more noise. We don't need to do that though, so back to Cyril. So in Cyril now we need to open that TIFF file we just saved. So we have our TIFF file here. You're going to open it. We're just going to double check some stuff. One thing we could have done, which I forgot to do, is on this image we can run a noise filter, a reduced noise filter in Photoshop on this. If you're going to do it, I recommend you try and tell it to preserve the details, because a lot of the time it's going to remove some of these nebula cloud details. In this case, I don't think we need it. There's other programs you can use, but I'm actually already really happy with this image. We can see here at 100%, so this is after a denoise, before a denoise. There's not much of a difference. Part of that is because we've already done a noise reduction over in Cyril before we brought it in, and part of it is just that the base Photoshop algorithm just doesn't handle it real well. There's AI ones now that would do a really good job with it, but again, I don't have that, and yeah. So now that we're back in Cyril, we need to save this back out as a fit file. So we're going to save it as a fit. We're going to replace the one that we already did. Save. Save. So now we can merge our data back in for our stars. So we're going to do a star recomposition. Tell it that we want our fit file here and our star file, our star mask here. Hang on a second. Helps if I select the right one. That one. So now we have to decide how much we are going to bring these in. One of my general suggestions, and it's also Deep Space Astro suggestion, is about anywhere from 0.5 to 0.8. I find with this image 0.7, 0.8 is just a little bit too much. So I actually like about 0.6 here. We can also adjust the symmetry point if we needed to on any of these to stretch things in and adjust them. So say for whatever reason you needed to stretch this further, you can do so, but again, just be aware if you do start stretching, you're going to start seeing possible noise and stuff like that up in the corner here. So this is actually looking okay. We can play with our symmetry point, but when we do, something to remember when you do that is you may lose some of your background stars. I'm happy with just this. We're going to apply, close. So now we have our base image. And looking at this, we can see we have some issues with the stars. Now, there's two ways we could have dealt with this. We could have dealt with this all the way back when it was still linear, which is the ideal way. Or we can try here. The downside to trying here is we have to do what's called a deconvolution. And as part of this, we need it to basically produce this the PSF file. The issue there is that sometimes it's really good other times it tends to, as I mentioned before, just not work that well. So if I can remember where it is, because I don't use it that often. We go dynamic PSF here. We're going to tell it to look for stars. So we're telling it to find the stars between 0.1 and 0.7 magnitude. And you'll notice it's found all these stars. And this is the reason why we tend not to do this at once we've taken it out of linear, because we've got a couple of really big stars that it's found, and which are not stars. The downside to this is that we basically have to find which star is producing these two big rings. The other option we've got, and it's actually a lot easier, is, damn it, we come back into here, dynamic. We tell it to clear all the stars. We quickly go, we look for one of the areas where we need some fixing, which is up and over in this corner. We're going to do a crop. We're going to tell it to search for stars again. So this is a lot better. We're going to come into image here. We're going to come down to deconvolution. We're going to tell it to generate a PSF. And what it's done here is, this is what the shape that it thinks the stars in here are. And it's going to try and fix them. We're going to try 0.6 at 10. Apply. Let it run. And it helps if I tell it PSF from stars, generate PSF. There we go. So we want to do, we want to undo. We're going to try and apply again. Now we're just looking, when this does this, for any oddities. I have to keep remembering this isn't Photoshop, and we don't press space and drag. So we just undid the crop and deselect all the stars. Let's just try applying this across the entire image. The reason we do it on a small thing, as Deep Space Astro explains in a tutorial that goes way more into detail, is that this can take a little bit when you do it on a big image. So you do it on a small one to try and find the optimal settings before you do this. But what we're looking for here is anything like this happening. So this is potentially bad and caused by, sometimes by the deconvolution, but it can also be caused, in the case of this one, by our photos. It was already there. So deconvolution's not actually going to do much here by the looks of it. So this is our final image. We are going to go save as JPEG. Ryan tutorial through to 1.jpg. 100%. Save it. Come over to Photoshop. Open. Double check. And in Photoshop, if we wanted to, we could also do a quick double check of our levels and curves. Put any watermarks on it that you want, and you know, you're done. Again, this is just my workflow. There's little bits and pieces of this that I'd spend a lot more time on, mostly to try and see if I couldn't get a better background extraction on some of this area up here. But this video is already 36 minutes long, so hopefully this helps the friends who wanted to know my workflow. And yeah, I will catch up with you later. Bye.